There's no other planet that has received as much attention from earthly beings as Mars. It's called the Red Planet and was named after the Roman god of war. It was even associated with a deity for famine and death. But today, things have changed. Humans are planning to colonize Mars for the sake of our species' survival. But the question remains, what do we know about the Red Planet and how did this exploration begin? Here's an episode on the complete history of Mars exploration. Mars has been a subject of considerable curiosity throughout most of history. Topics concerning the planet have been cloaked in mysteries and have been progressively unveiled as technology advanced. But what do we really know about this planet? Mars is the fourth planet from the Sun, and it gets its name the Red Planet because of its rusty red appearance. The planet has a very thin atmosphere, which is why it's said to have cold deserts that are barren. The planet is a little larger than half the size of Earth, but is less dense, with items weighing only about a third as much as they do on Earth. As humans become aware of its existence, they wondered if there was life on this planet, as some even suspected to have witnessed trails, canals, and faces. Now, before we begin our Mars exploration chapters, you should know who the first person to discover this magnificent red planet was. It was first discovered in 1610 by Galileo Galilei, but sources say that the earliest records of Mars observation came from the ancient Egyptian era during the second millennium BC. Since then, curiosity about this planet has led the human race to look for ways to get to the planet. So here's where and when this space race first began. The Soviet Union. During the middle of the 20th century, as technological advancements began to take shape, allowing our species to learn more about space and go beyond the moon. This is when the Soviets first thought of attempting an expedition to Mars. At that time, the US and the Soviets were in a race to reach the moon. They had their brightest minds working on projects that would leave their footprints imprinted on Earth's companion. Missions like reaching Mars were additional goals for them. NASA has kept records on the Soviets' trips to the Red Planet. It was possible for them to undertake this major expedition because they had Yuri Gagarin. Who was he? Well, he was a Soviet pilot and cosmonaut who became the first human to journey into outer space. According to NASA's monographs in aerospace history, the Soviets launched 8 Mars missions between 1960 and 1969. But unfortunately, they fell short for a variety of reasons, such as lost ships, inability to enter orbit, and radio malfunctions. Over time, NASA learned about their technology and came back with the Mariner program. So what was the Mariner program? It was carried out by NASA, the American Space Agency, to investigate other worlds. The Jet Propulsion Laboratory of NASA designed and constructed 10 robotic interplanetary probes called Mariners between 1962 and late 1973 to investigate the inner solar system. The Mariners 1 and 2 were bound for Venus, whereas Mariner 3 was slated to go to Mars. However, as quickly as it made a successful liftoff, the probe lost contact with Earth. NASA then launched Mariner 4 to make up for the Mariner 3's loss. It was then that the first mission to Mars was successful as the probe flew by the Red Planet at a range of just over 6,116 miles. Mariner 4 gave humanity the first close-up of photos of the Red Planet, as well as collecting other scientific data. They followed this up with new Mars missions, with Mariners 6, 7, and 9 returning clear and awe-inspiring images of the planet between 1969 and 1971. Now, out of these, Mariner 9 was perhaps the most successful probe of the Mariner exploration program. This spacecraft was the first to orbit another planet, beating the Soviet Union's Mars 2 probe by 13 days. This probe sent over 7,000 images to Earth, while mapping 85% of the planet's surface. This was when humanity found out more about the planet's appearance and structure, which included the immense canyon named Valles Marineris. It also found the inactive supervolcano Olympus Mons, which towered over the landscape at 15.5 miles high, which explains that the planet had once been volcanically active. Furthermore, the shape of the land and various gullies and other eroded features suggested that the planet had once had water, though we don't know what happened to it. This was especially intriguing for scientists who linked liquid water to life. Now, this information gave the Soviets a chance to come back stronger. They launched the robotic space probe Mars 3. In 1971, the Soviet Union's Mars 3 was launched after the Mars 2 lander crashed on the Martian surface. It was the first spacecraft to attain an actual landing on Mars. As NASA notes, its primary mission was to take scientific data of the atmosphere, collect samples, and analyze other data. However, if you take this from a political standpoint, getting the first photos of Mars's surface would be fantastic PR, and this is what the Soviets wanted. But then again, right after this, NASA took the lead with the Viking Program. The only thing that the Mars 3 was able to accomplish was to land on the surface of the planet, but it took just 49 seconds for it to topple over and lose its communication systems with Earth. It was a success to some degree, but it was quickly forgotten because of its limited success. By now, NASA was well aware that no one had really touched the surface of the planet. But thanks to NASA's constant striving to do the impossible, they launched the Viking Program. What was the Viking Program? The program consisted of a pair of identical space probes which were named Viking 1 and Viking 2, and were set to land on the Red Planet. This was aimed to be accomplished in 1976. The program consisted of two main parts, an orbiter and a lander. The orbiter was set to orbit the planet, while the lander was to gather data on the planet's surface. However, at the time, this was the most controversial project undertaken by NASA, as this initiative cost over $1.6 billion. The mission was deemed successful, and it is acknowledged for having contributed to the formation of the majority of the corpus of information about Mars in the late 1990s and early 2000s. The orbiters gathered the most accurate information and pictures of the red planet to date. The landers carried out tests to look for evidence of life in addition to taking the first ground pictures of Mars. They did not come across any proof of it. Enter the Mars Observer and Mars Global Surveyor. Following the Viking program, there was a rather long pause in Martian exploration missions. According to NASA's historical mission record, the only mission undertaken was by the Russians when they launched two spacecraft to the planet's moon but failed. Why do you think they took this hiatus? Well, one of the reasons was the cost of the project. It was only in 1992 that they proceeded to re-enter the space race. In that year, the Mars Observer spacecraft, basically a modified commercial satellite, was launched. According to Space.com, this spaceship ended up costing $813 million, or more than 4 times the original budget. Sadly, the 1993 Mars Observer crashed before managing to orbit the planet. After determining that a gasoline tank rupture was probably at fault, NASA changed their original strategy. Meanwhile, NASA began working on the Mars Global Surveyor project, which resulted in positive results. This probe was successful in revolving around the red planet, and this took place on September 12, 1997. Using a laser altimeter, the mission surveyed practically the entire planet's surface and returned comprehensive photos of it. In certain areas, they were actually more precise than what had been charted on Earth. By the time the Global Surveyor's primary mission ended on February 1, 2001, it had returned 83,000 photos to Earth. It lasted for much longer than expected as well, and NASA was last contacted by it in November 2006. Things seem to be going on the right track, so much so that another country joined the space race: Japan. They initiated the Mars expedition by launching their very own space probe, Nozomi. The United States and Russia were the sole participants in the Mars exploration game up until the late 1990s. On July 4, 1998, Japan launched the Nozomi spacecraft to the Red Planet, altering this according to the Institute of Space and Aeronautical Science. NASA describes how Nozomi was both Japan's first interplanetary mission and its fourth deep space probe. After launch, the probe performed 2 gravity-assisted slingshot orbits around the Moon and Earth to gain momentum before making its way to Mars. At that point, issues started to arise. The propeller malfunctioned due to a faulty valve, forcing the Japanese Space Agency to change Nozomi's direction. Nozomi was sent to the Red Planet after 2 further Earth flybys to make up for the lost fuel. Solar flares harmed Nozomi's electrical and communication systems at this point in time. Due to this, the Japanese lost communication with the spacecraft for 2 months. 4 years later than expected, in December of 2003, the probe made it to Mars. But by that time, its luck had run out. Due to the failure of Nozomi's primary engines, it was forced into a very elliptical orbit around the Sun and was finally lost in space. Remember when NASA had the controversial expenditure on the Mariner program, which cost more than $1 billion? Well, they later came up with a much faster, better, and cheaper version, the Mars Pathfinder. The Planetary Society described the initiative as a cheaper and better version, as it had a comparatively low price tag of $485 million. The goals? Well, it was to place a lander called Pathfinder on the surface of Mars, together with a rover named Sojourner. Since the end of the Viking mission, this would be the first landing on Mars. According to NASA, Pathfinder was launched on December 4, 1996, and used airbags to make a safe landing on the rugged plains of the Ares Vallis region of Mars on July 4, 1997. The Planetary Society claims that Sojourner was successfully operational and then spent the next 3 months carefully exploring the neighborhood. Although the mission was marketed as a technological demonstration, it also provided crucial scientific data. In this aspect, it was a great success in demonstrating how Martian exploration might be carried out. The morphology of the rocks, for instance, indicated the possibility of historical water flow and magnetism in the planet's dust particles, which may have been brought to the surface by a water cycle. All of this provided evidence that the planet could have once supported life. The race still continues. While NASA's Pathfinder mission was a huge success, not all of the other faster, better, cheaper missions of the late 1990s were. After the success of the Mars Pathfinder, NASA launched the Mars Climate Orbiter and Mars Polar Lander missions between 1998 and 1999. However, as soon as they reached the planet, both failed. Due to these failures, NASA started to change its faster, better, cheaper strategy. The outcome? Well, it was none other than the Mars Odyssey, which was a spacecraft that was built for a cost of $297 million. On October 4, 2001, it arrived in Martian orbit after a relatively quick 200-day journey. The goal? Well, it was sent out to study the atmosphere of the planet, using sensors to scan its surface and serving as a relay station for upcoming terrestrial investigation. The discovery of hydrogen, which suggested the presence of water approximately a mile below the surface, was one of the mission's most intriguing findings. Since it has been in service, the Mars Odyssey has given us knowledge about Mars that no other spacecraft has been able to. It has discovered salt deposits, caverns that contain life, and has provided detailed analysis of the Martian environment's annual cycles. By 2021, this daring piece of technology will have returned more than 1 million high-resolution pictures of Mars to Earth. Study finds water on Mars, microbes, hydrogen, and methane. It appears that the success of the Mars Odyssey started to widen the door for further planetary exploration. The Mars Express program, which was launched by the European Space Agency and entered orbit on December 25, 2003, entered the fray and began capturing even more precise photos of the planet. The Mars Express was successful in that its orbiter may have found liquid water. This was a further indication that there could be microbial life on Mars to go along with the discovery of methane. Beagle 2, the rover that was aboard the spacecraft, sadly failed to establish contact after landing. Its solar panel's malfunction was discovered afterwards as the reason for its failure. In the meanwhile, NASA started a mission to continue the work of the Sojourner rover. The rover's Spirit and Opportunity touched down on Mars in January 2004. These robots took on the role of field geologists, testing and analyzing rocks with the use of their equipment, while also capturing stunning full-color photographs of their surroundings. Their analysis started to suggest that the dry Mars had a wet history. Amazingly, this pair of rovers continued to operate well past their intended 90-day mission. While Opportunity lived for more than 14 years and covered 28 miles, Spirit lasted 6 years and traveled around 5 miles. It should be noted that NASA took great precaution not to send the rovers too far from their home base. Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter and Mars Phoenix Lander. The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, NASA's next mission, was a huge success. On March 10, 2006, this spacecraft was launched into orbit around Mars and is still in use today. According to the Planetary Society, the orbiter's primary objective is to investigate the climate and geologic history of Mars. Scientists believe that through studying the data it gathers, they will be able to comprehend why what once may have been a livable world is now a wasteland. In order to achieve this, the orbiter is equipped with 3 powerful cameras: radar that can scan below the surface of the planet for ice, sensors to analyze the composition of the atmosphere, and devices that map the surface's mineralogy. NASA's Phoenix Mars lander, which touched down on the planet's northern pole on May 25, 2008, provided proof that there is ice on Mars. The lander dug up samples from the surface in response to the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter's reports of ice. The lander also featured tiny furnaces to heat the ice in order to handle the freezing samples. Even snowfall was detected, but it vaporized before falling. Unfortunately, after 3 months, the lander stopped communicating. Even so, it was now clear that Mars had water present in the form of ice and experienced predictable seasonal cycles of precipitation. The future and more. Mars is now our solar system's best understood planet outside of Earth, thanks to increased Martian investigation. But more research is needed, especially to determine if Mars formerly supported life and whether it would be able to do so in the future. That is what the Curiosity rover from NASA aims to do. After touching down on the red planet in August 2012, this rover has been exploring the Gale crater, gathering air, soil, and rock samples for study. Curiosity has a variety of scientific equipment, including a robotic arm, mini cameras, a spectrometer, and lasers to help it do this. The Perseverance rover, which arrived at the Jezero crater on February 18, 2021, is more advanced than Curiosity. The rover is equipped with 7 instruments in its search for microbial life, including a ground-penetrating radar, camera equipment that can determine the chemical makeup of objects, and a gadget to test if oxygen can be created from Martian carbon dioxide. Drilling core samples and even packaging them in tubes for later retrieval are tasks that Perseverance is capable of. Surprisingly, Perseverance also brought Ingenuity, a tiny helicopter drone, to Mars. On April 19, 2021, the drone launched, marking the first powered flight on an alien world. While it has been obvious from the start that the United States has dominated Mars exploration, other nations have started and completed successful ventures. NASA reports that India successfully placed a spacecraft in orbit around Mars in 2014 to investigate the atmosphere and surface of the planet. The Tianwen mission from China, launched in 2021, was the nation's first successful attempt at Martian exploration. It was also the first nation other than the United States to send a rover to the surface of Mars. A satellite from the United Arab Emirates was successfully sent into orbit around Mars in the same year. According to Space.com, the orbiter will examine the planet's atmosphere after being launched by a Japanese rocket. Looking to Mars seems to provide promise, even as Earth struggles with environmental issues. Perhaps it can be changed into a brand new Earth that is habitable yet free of problems. Neil deGrasse Tyson, an astronomer, stated in The Guardian that if you have the capability of geoengineering to terraform Mars into Earth, then you have the power of geoengineering to change Earth back into Earth. This line of reasoning would be a better one to take into account. I hope this video has helped you gain some insight on the complete history of Mars exploration. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more content just like this.